Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Hopefully you're seeing the slide there. So I am going to be talking about a micro-credential framework that was developed here in Maine, and I wanted to start by providing a little background on the project. So the project was started with funding from the Lumina Foundation, and it was a project in partnership with the University of Maine system and the Public State Library, the Department of Labor, Department of Corrections, lots of partners to create micro-credentials for specific populations, including low income, Native American corrections, and immigrants. And adult education was brought in very early in the project, and you'll hear why when I get to the next slide. So that's a little background of where we began. So bringing all of these partners together to work on micro-credentials, we needed to first have a shared understanding of micro-credential definition and a framework for building them. And so what we all really agreed in what the Lumina work was focused on was creating micro-credentials that allow us to meet a student where they are, personalize their learning for their goal, recognize the learning that they bring in, be able to narrowly focus training to remove barriers and create easy access in terms of time frame and scheduling. And so that was where adult ed came in, because we are recognized in our state as being nimble and flexible and being able to create programs that meet students in non-traditional ways. We were also really thinking about very specific competencies and skills that would be verified through badges and have to be portable and in a digital form, like the definition of a badge. They should be endorsed by institutions and employers. So we were all starting from this shared definition of what the micro-credentials should do for our participants. And then we had to come up with a shared framework. And so the framework that we came up with was every micro-credential, developed under this project would have 3 levels. A first level, which would be foundational, a second level, which would cover the occupational skills in that training pathway, and then a third level, which would include some work-based experience where participants could apply the skills that they had learned. And then we went on to focus on several different micro-credentials. And the one that I'm going to talk about today is a computer support specialist micro-credential that I was involved in building and then piloting with different populations. So we took all of those shared understandings of what a micro-credential is, and then on top of that, we knew that it had to be based on labor market information and useful for our communities, our employers, and our participants in terms of providing skills for jobs that exist in the state of Maine. And so the computer support specialist, a lot of that legwork had been done already because we participated in the Tech Hire grant. And through that grant, we identified computer support specialist as a growing area of employment. And so we focused that training on computer support specialist. And we had some of that career pathway built out already. And then we took what we had and we adapted it to those 3 levels. So what would be needed for level 1, what would be needed for level 2, what would be needed for level 3, and then what are the industry recognized badges that can fulfill those competencies at each level. We used the IT industry competency, and that is a link there when you get the slides, but you can also just Google the US DOL competency model clearinghouse. They have several competency models for different industries and also have a tool to build your own competency model when you're creating a career pathway that they haven't already defined. So it's a really useful website when you're thinking about workforce and competencies. And the other thing about the computer support specialist micro-credential is that it was very adaptable to the pandemic. We were beginning this work during some of the more locked down part of the pandemic. We had already taken the tech hire training and moved it online. And so, as you can imagine, a computer support specialist training or an IT training really lent itself to becoming a online hybrid course. So I wanted to show you in a little more detail the 3 levels that we came up with for the computer support specialist micro-credential. So each level contains competencies, again, which we took from the competency framework from the US DOL, a description of sort of a larger set of skills that those competencies address, and then sort of how are they verified? What are the embedded credentials and badges? So for a computer support specialist training, the occupational skills training is, for our purposes, we looked at the CompTIA Plus. And so we had to think about what are the competencies at level 2 and what do students need to know at level 1 in order to be successful at level 2. So from our work with Tech Hire, we understood the importance of foundational digital literacy skills. Again, we went back to industry. We looked at the CompTIA Plus pathways, and we found a credential that's sort of a bridge credential called the IC3. And we already had IC3 and we're using it. So that was one that we identified as being a foundational badge to get people the digital skills needed to start to engage with the content at level 2. We also knew that customer service, work readiness, employability skills, big part of being a computer support specialist. So those were also necessary skills at the foundational level. And again, that was confirmed by crosswalking with the competency framework that we found at the US Department of Labor. Level 2, as I mentioned, CompTIA Plus, and you can see the competencies. We're starting to get into IT competencies here, some higher level employability skills as well, which again, the foundation at level 1, it's not only about work, but it was those skills to be successful at level 2. Very intensive training, takes a lot of time and commitment. So those were embedded in level 2 as well. And then level 3 was the work-based experience. So taking those occupational skills, those work readiness skills, and putting them to use in hopefully an on-the-job experience. We tried to make, we embedded several options in level 3 because we knew that not all of our programs had an employer to work with. And so there you can see in the credentials and badges of level 3, there are several ways for the student to complete that, including a credential called the PC Pro exam, which is sort of the next level after CompTIA Plus and includes some experiential things that show an employer sort of the same skills they'd see from someone who is employed for 6 to 12 months. So aligns to that workplace experience. So those are the 3 levels. And what I really wanted to talk to you all about today was the computer support specialist micro-credential, but how we adapted it when we worked with multilingual learners and sort of took the micro-credential and turned it into an integrated education and training. So as I mentioned, we ran this with several different pilots. We ran it with the low income population, the correctional population, and multilingual learners. And all of them needed some little tweaks, but I'm going to talk about the multilingual learner because became very close to what we call an integrated education and training. It did become an integrated education and training. So a little background, we had in the end two cohorts, excuse me, of multilingual learners going through this training, one in fall of 2021 and the other in the spring of 2021. And each cohort had 6 students, so 12 students altogether. At the very beginning of the first cohort, it was clear to the instructor and the program that English language support was needed. It was a very diverse group of students. Some of them, many of them, had tech background from their home country, so they were coming in with a lot of the tech skills, but they had varying levels of English and also different goals in terms of where they wanted to end their training or end up in terms of their career. We had some who wanted cybersecurity, some data analytics, so a little bit different. So level 1, right away, we knew we had to adapt. And the first thing that we did, programs were already familiar with Burlington English. This also lined up with the state purchasing engine licenses for our program. So we were able to connect them with that product, which had a specific curriculum on technology language for multilingual students. So contextualized English, they bumped up the customer service part of the training to really work on the speaking. So pronunciation was identified as something that needed to be worked on with this group. It became hybrid. So when Tech Hire switched to adapt to the pandemic, it became all online with face-to-face, but virtual. And working with the multilingual students, we were at a point in time where we were able to come back together. So they developed hybrid. They realized the importance of meeting together face-to-face, and they also were able to provide a Portuguese native speaker to the students. Many of them have Portuguese as their native language, and that tutor was available in the face-to-face space and also online to help with vocabulary and other things. So the outcomes where we are right now in terms of that program, 10 out of 12 successfully completed level 1. So that means they earned the work readiness badge that they needed to earn. They earned the IC3 credential that they needed to earn level 1 of the micro-credential. 7 of those students are still currently working on level 2. The other thing that's interesting that happened in that program is that level 2 got a little bit differentiated to meet the specific needs of each of those students or the goals. So CompTIA A+ was the credential that we planned to embed in this course. And then as the instructor worked individually with each student, he found comparable but different credentials that fit their needs more closely. So we ended up with students studying towards the CompTIA A+, the Test Out PC Pro, the Office Pro, but all of those hit on the same competencies, but with a little bit different of a focus. So level 3, we have no participants in level 3 at this point, so they're all still working on level 2. But I think that the fact that 10 successfully completed level 1, and I will share that those completion numbers with the multilingual group were higher than they were with the corrections and the low income group. And I think it was because of the way that we were able to adapt it into an integrated education and training to fit the needs of the students. So I think the most important information from all of this is the lessons that we learned along the way. And I put pluses and minuses here, and I just want to say the pluses sort of represent either confirmation, something was confirmed for us, or it was an added bonus or something that we learned. And the minuses represent either a yes, but, or an issue that we did encounter. So I think the first thing that we discovered in all of the pilots is, yes, micro-credentials do allow for personalization and recognizing the learning of students. And also the gaps in learning, because they are competency based. So they really allow you to meet the student where they are and fill in the gaps that they have to get where they want to go. The yes, but of that is it's a lot of work, and it takes time and practice for instructors and programs to learn how to align varying individual credentials, backgrounds, past life experiences to those competencies. Also, we did confirm that, yes, micro-credentials can provide a narrowly focused curriculum and allow access to those traditionally excluded through shorter and more flexible time frames. And I would add, and also through alternative kind of curriculum. The use of these online curriculum that we adapted, the IC3, the CompTIA, the Test Out. Again, you're able to go in and adapt those in terms of pinpointing which lessons for which students, translating vocabulary into home languages. So it was not only an alternative time frame, but also an alternative and more flexible curriculum, I would say. But part of that is it really does need to be done in a cohort facilitated manner. Even if students are on individual curriculum, they can still be brought together and do some common things together and have check-ins and things like that. And it must include supports around access, digital literacy, and content. Yes, micro-credentials are endorsed by institutions and employers. Theoretically, in Maine, we have that agreement from everyone. Yes, we endorse this micro-credential, but we're still struggling with what that might mean in terms of a tangible result for a participant. So specifically, the micro-credentials are designed to be worth college credit because those industry recognized credentials have been vetted by the American Council of Education, and they've agreed that somebody who earns the IC3 could get 3 college credits. So it's that could get that we're still working on. The student has to go through the prior learning assessment. It's not an automatic thing. And it may not be what entices a participant to enroll or complete. One of the things we found with the micro-credentials is many students earn that CompTIA A+, and then they get a job. Or even more students got a job before they even earned the A+, because the employer really just wants the skills and doesn't care as much about the credential. So it's what is success here? Is it earning the micro-credential, or is it getting the student where they wanted to go in a way that works for them? I think that micro-credentials can really fill a need for participants, communities, and employers. And in order to do that, all of those people need to be involved in the process of designing micro-credentials. So where are we here in Maine right now with micro-credentials? There's still some money left from the Lumina project that is being used to pilot new workforce micro-credentials, and we have 2 programs that are being developed right now, again in partnership with the University of Maine system. So adult ed teams go through the University of Maine system's micro-credential framework course, and as part of that course they develop their micro-credentials. So they're building that metadata. What are the competencies? What are the badges? How is it verified? And in progress right now, we have a micro-credential being built for early childhood development, and we'll have one starting soon for certified medical assistant. What I like about this is it very much mirrors IET development, where you need to come together with your partners and post-secondary and employers and think about the skills that are needed to get your population where they need to go. These teams must include adult education, employer, industry, post-secondary, and subject matter experts, and they can include more people. So the micro-credentials are being developed with all the right people in the room. And we are also excited to be developing or investigating developing a professional development micro-credential for adult ed teachers in the state of Maine. A big question remains always sustainability. How will programs continue to fund micro-credentials going forward? But the hope is when they are built with all of these partners and they're meeting the needs of the community and the participants and industry, that they will continue to be funded.